The rain had been falling since early morning, turning the busy city streets into rivers of gray reflections. People hurried beneath umbrellas, their eyes fixed on their destinations, barely noticing the world around them. Cars splashed through puddles, horns echoed in the distance, and cold wind carried the scent of wet pavement. Near the entrance of an old subway station sat a young man named Daniel. His clothes were worn, his shoes had holes in them, and his thin jacket offered little protection against the freezing weather. Beside him rested a small cardboard sign that simply read, "Anything helps." "Thank you." Most people walked past without making eye contact. Some pretended not to see him. Others glanced for only a second before looking away. Daniel had grown used to being invisible. Only 3 years earlier, he had been a successful carpenter with a loving wife and a little daughter named Emma. Life had been simple but happy. Every evening he returned home covered in sawdust, greeted by Emma's laughter as she ran into his arms. Then everything changed. A construction accident left Daniel with a severe back injury. He couldn't work for months. Medical bills piled up. His employer replaced him. The savings disappeared. His wife struggled to keep everything together, but the pressure became unbearable. One heartbreaking day she packed her belongings, took Emma, and moved across the country to live with relatives. Daniel never blamed her. She was trying to survive. After losing his apartment, Daniel found himself sleeping in shelters, abandoned buildings, and sometimes under bridges. The hardest part wasn't the hunger. It wasn't the cold. It wasn't even the loneliness. The hardest part was believing that he no longer mattered. That afternoon, as rain continued pouring, a little girl wearing a bright yellow raincoat stopped in front of him. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her mother had already walked several steps ahead before realizing her daughter wasn't beside her. "Lucy," the woman called. But Lucy didn't move. She looked directly at Daniel. "Mister," she asked softly, "are you hungry?" Daniel smiled gently. "A little." Lucy opened her tiny backpack. She pulled out a peanut butter sandwich wrapped carefully in paper. "My grandma made this for me," she said. "You can have it." Her mother hurried back, embarrassed. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to Daniel while trying to lead Lucy away. But Daniel shook his head. "Don't apologize." He accepted the sandwich with trembling hands. "It may be the nicest gift I've received in years." Lucy smiled. "It tastes better when shared." Before leaving, she reached into her pocket and handed him something else. A tiny smooth stone painted with bright colors. Across the front were written 4 simple words. "You matter more today." Daniel stared at the little stone long after they disappeared into the crowd. For the first time in months, someone had reminded him he still mattered. That evening he didn't eat the sandwich immediately. He waited until another homeless veteran named Harold returned to the shelter. Harold hadn't eaten all day either. Daniel broke the sandwich in half. "We'll share." Harold laughed. "That's barely enough for one. It'll be enough for 2. As they ate together, Daniel showed him the painted stone. Harold smiled. "Keep that. It'll remind you there's still good in people." The next morning Daniel decided something had to change. He couldn't magically fix his life. But perhaps he could stop waiting for someone else to rescue him. Outside a grocery store he noticed an elderly woman struggling to lift several heavy bags. Without hesitation he walked over. "May I help?" She looked nervous at first. Then she nodded. Daniel carried the groceries nearly 6 blocks to her apartment. When they arrived, she reached into her purse. "I'd like to pay you." Daniel smiled. "No thank you. You've already given me something." "What?" "A chance." The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Henderson. Before he left, she disappeared into her kitchen. She returned carrying hot vegetable soup in a large container. "And now," she smiled, "allow me to help you." Daniel thanked her sincerely. Word slowly spread through the neighborhood about the polite homeless man who refused money but gladly helped anyone carrying groceries or moving furniture. One afternoon the owner of a small bookstore watched Daniel spend nearly an hour helping customers carry heavy boxes without asking for anything. The owner stepped outside. "My name is Samuel. I've been watching you." Daniel became nervous. "I wasn't bothering anyone." Samuel smiled. "Actually, I was wondering if you'd like a job." Daniel blinked. "A job? I need someone to organize deliveries. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work." Tears filled Daniel's eyes. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning." Daniel worked harder than anyone Samuel had ever hired. He arrived before sunrise. He stayed late whenever necessary. He cleaned shelves without being asked. He repaired broken tables. He fixed old bookcases. Within weeks, customers began complimenting Samuel about the improvements. One afternoon, Samuel asked a question. "Why do you work so hard?" Daniel looked around the bookstore. "Because someone believed I still had value." Months passed. Daniel rented a tiny room. It wasn't much. A bed, a small window, a second-hand chair, but it was home. On the shelf beside his bed rested Luce's painted stone. Every morning he looked at it before leaving for work. One snowy evening, Daniel noticed a teenage boy sitting outside the bookstore. The boy looked frightened, cold, hungry. Daniel recognized that expression immediately. He had worn it himself. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. "Marcus. Have you eaten today?" Marcus shook his head. Daniel bought 2 bowls of hot stew from a nearby diner. As they ate, Marcus explained everything. His mother had died. His foster placement had failed. He had nowhere safe to sleep. Daniel listened quietly. Then he remembered the shelter that had once welcomed him. "I know somewhere you can stay tonight." Marcus looked surprised. "Why are you helping me?" Daniel smiled. "Because someone once helped me." Over the next several months, Daniel became a volunteer at the shelter every weekend. He repaired broken beds, painted walls, cooked meals, listened to people who had no one else. One volunteer asked him something. "You spend all week working. Why spend your weekends here?" Daniel looked around the crowded room. "Because hope grows faster when it's shared." One spring morning, Samuel entered the bookstore carrying an envelope. "I have something for you." Inside was paperwork making Daniel assistant manager, along with a raise. Daniel could hardly speak. "You've earned every bit of this," Samuel said. That evening, Daniel walked to the park where he had often spent lonely nights years before. He sat quietly beneath a blooming tree. Children laughed nearby. Families enjoyed picnics. For the first time in years, Daniel wasn't watching life pass by. He was living it. As he stood to leave, he noticed a wallet lying near a bench. Inside were hundreds of dollars. Credit cards. Identification. The owner was easy to find. An older businessman rushed toward him after Daniel called. "You found it. Everything's still inside." Daniel handed it over. The man counted nothing. Instead, he stared at Daniel. "You didn't take anything." Daniel smiled. "It wasn't mine." The businessman insisted on rewarding him. Daniel refused repeatedly. Finally, the man asked why. Daniel answered simply, "Someone once gave me kindness without expecting anything back. I've been trying to do the same ever since." The businessman introduced himself as Michael. Over coffee they talked for nearly 2 hours. Michael owned several furniture workshops. When Daniel mentioned his experience as a carpenter, Michael became interested. A week later, Daniel began working part-time helping train young apprentices. His skills returned quickly. Before long, he supervised entire projects. Years passed. Daniel became respected throughout the community. Not because he was wealthy. Not because he held an important title. But because he never forgot where he came from. Every Christmas he organized a dinner for homeless families. Every winter he distributed warm coats. Every summer he repaired homes for elderly neighbors free of charge. People often asked him what inspired him. He always reached into his pocket. The tiny painted stone had faded with time. The colors were chipped, but the words remained visible. "You matter more today." One afternoon, nearly 8 years after receiving that stone, Daniel attended a neighborhood charity fair. Children painted rocks at one booth. Adults volunteered at another. Music filled the air. As Daniel walked past the painting station, a young woman called his name. "Daniel." He turned. Standing before him was Lucy. Now 16 years old. He recognized her smile immediately. "You probably don't remember me," she laughed. "The little girl with the sandwich." Daniel reached into his pocket. Without saying a word, he placed the painted stone into her hands. Lucy's eyes widened. "You kept it. Every single day." Tears formed in her eyes. "I painted hundreds of these with my grandma. I wondered if anyone still had one." Daniel smiled. "I owe my life to it." She looked confused. Daniel told her everything. About the sandwich, the shelter, the bookstore, Samuel, Marcus, the volunteer work, the furniture company, everything. When he finished, Lucy wiped away tears. "I was only trying to be nice." Daniel gently shook his head. "No, You reminded a broken man he still mattered. That changed everything. Lucy hugged him tightly. Nearby, her grandmother watched with quiet tears. She had taught Lucy that kindness was never wasted. Now she was witnessing proof. Months later, Daniel and Lucy created a community project together. Children painted thousands of colorful stones with encouraging messages. Volunteers left them in hospitals, schools, shelters, parks, bus stops, anywhere someone might need hope. The movement spread to neighboring cities. Then across the country, people shared stories online about finding unexpected encouragement during the darkest moments of their lives. One message read, "I found a painted stone on the day I planned to give up." Another said, "Whoever left this saved me." Daniel never claimed credit. Whenever reporters interviewed him, he simply said, "Kindness belongs to everyone." On a quiet autumn evening, Daniel received an unexpected phone call. His daughter Emma. He hadn't spoken with her in nearly 12 years. She was 20 now. She had searched for him for months. "I heard about your community project," she said through tears. "I didn't know it was you." Daniel struggled to speak. "I've missed you every day." "So have I." They met the following weekend. The first few minutes were awkward. Years of silence are heavy. Then Emma stepped forward and hugged him. Neither wanted to let go. They spent hours talking, sharing memories, answering painful questions, healing old wounds. Emma admitted something. "I used to think you gave up. But now I know. You never stopped fighting." Daniel smiled softly. "I just needed someone to remind me who I was." As the years continued, Daniel's story inspired schools, churches, businesses, and entire neighborhoods. Not because he had become rich. Not because he had become famous. But because one act of kindness had created another. Then another. Then thousands more. People often imagine kindness as something grand. A fortune donated. A heroic rescue. A life-changing speech. But sometimes kindness is nothing more than half a sandwich shared in the rain. A painted stone. A smile. A few words spoken at exactly the right moment. None of those things seem powerful alone. Yet together they can rescue a heart that has almost forgotten how to hope. Long after Daniel grew old, children in the city still painted colorful stones carrying messages of hope. Many never knew where the tradition began. They simply believed that somewhere, someone needed to hear they mattered. And they were right. Because every person carries battles invisible to the world. Every stranger has a story. Every heart longs to be seen. The greatest gift we can ever offer another human being is not money, success, or fame. It is the simple reminder that they are not forgotten. That their life has value. That tomorrow can be better than today. Kindness asks for very little. Sometimes only a few seconds. Sometimes only a gentle smile. Yet its impact can echo across years, across generations, and across countless lives we may never meet. One small act of compassion can become another person's reason to keep going. And that single decision, to notice someone, to help without expecting anything in return, to choose love over indifference, has the power to change the world, one heart at a time. Daniel hardly slept that night. The shelter was noisy as always. Someone coughed constantly in the corner. Another man muttered in his sleep. Rain tapped against the old windows, but Daniel wasn't thinking about the weather. He kept staring at the small painted stone resting in his hand. "You matter more today." 4 simple words. 4 words that somehow carried more warmth than anything he had heard in years. He carefully slipped the stone into the inside pocket of his jacket before closing his eyes. The next morning, he woke before sunrise. Instead of sitting outside the subway station, he walked through the city without any destination. For the first time in months, he noticed things he had stopped seeing: the orange glow of the sunrise reflecting off tall buildings, birds gathering on telephone wires, and the smell of fresh bread drifting from a nearby bakery. Life had continued moving while he had been standing still. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to move again. As he walked past a grocery store, he noticed an elderly woman struggling to push a shopping cart overloaded with groceries. One of the bags ripped open, sending oranges rolling across the parking lot. People looked. Nobody stopped. Daniel hurried over. "Don't worry, ma'am." He chased every orange before cars could run them over. The elderly woman smiled with relief. "Thank you, dear." He tied the broken bag with an old piece of rope he carried in his pocket and helped her load everything back into the cart. "Where do you live?" he asked. Only a few blocks away. I'll carry these. She looked uncertain. You've already done enough. Daniel smiled gently. I insist. The bags were heavy, but years of construction work had made him stronger than he looked. They walked slowly together. Along the way they talked about ordinary things. The weather, flowers, old memories. For a little while, Daniel forgot he was homeless. He simply felt like another neighbor walking someone home. When they reached her apartment building, she reached into her purse. Please take this. She held out a $20 bill. Daniel shook his head. No, thank you. You need it. I do. But I didn't help because I wanted money. The woman stared at him. Few people had ever refused money so politely. Then at least wait here. She disappeared inside. 5 minutes later she returned carrying a steaming container of homemade vegetable soup and 2 thick slices of fresh bread. If you won't accept money, accept lunch. Daniel's stomach growled loudly. Both of them laughed. It's delicious, she said. My husband used to say soup fixes almost everything. Daniel accepted it with gratitude. It certainly fixes today. Before leaving, the woman introduced herself. My name is Margaret. I'm Daniel. I hope our paths cross again. So do I. As Daniel walked away holding the warm container, he realized something strange. Helping someone else had somehow made him feel less helpless himself. That afternoon he sat in the park eating the soup. Nearby, a young boy repeatedly failed to throw a baseball to his father. Each bad throw made the boy look more embarrassed. His father never yelled. Instead he smiled. You'll get it. Again. 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 Daniel watched for nearly 20 minutes. Finally the boy threw the perfect pitch. Both father and son celebrated as though they had won a championship. Daniel smiled. He missed moments like that. He missed Emma. He wondered how tall she had become. Whether she still loved drawing. Whether she still remembered the bedtime stories he used to invent. A lump formed in his throat. He quietly whispered, I hope you're happy. The following week Daniel returned to the grocery store, not because he needed anything. Because he hoped someone else might need help. Sure enough, opportunity arrived. A young pregnant woman struggled to load bottled water into her car. Daniel offered assistance. She hesitated for a second, then nodded. Thank you. After loading everything, she smiled warmly. I wish more people were like you. Daniel laughed softly. You probably wouldn't have said that a year ago. What do you mean? I've been homeless. Her smile disappeared for a moment. Not because she was afraid. Because she was surprised. I never would have guessed. Daniel shrugged. Homeless people don't all look the same. Before driving away she handed him a paper bag. Inside were apples, bananas, bottled water, and 2 sandwiches. My husband packed too much lunch. I think you need it more than we do. Daniel thanked her sincerely. That evening, instead of keeping all the food, he shared it with 3 other men at the shelter. Harold looked at him in disbelief. You finally catch some luck and you split it. Daniel smiled. It tastes better shared. Harold laughed. You've changed. Maybe. Or maybe I finally remembered who I was. Days turned into weeks. Daniel became known around the neighborhood. If someone's tire went flat, Daniel helped. If an elderly neighbor needed furniture moved, Daniel helped. If litter covered the park after a weekend festival, Daniel stayed until every piece was gone. Nobody paid him. He never asked. One afternoon a small bookstore owner stood quietly inside his shop watching Daniel sweep leaves away from the sidewalk in front of several businesses. No one had asked him to do it. He simply noticed it needed to be done. The owner stepped outside. Young man. Daniel looked up. Yes. Why are you cleaning my sidewalk? Daniel leaned on the broom. It looked dirty. So now it doesn't. The owner chuckled. What if I told you I couldn't afford to pay you? Daniel smiled. That's all right. I wasn't looking for payment. The owner extended his hand. My name is Samuel. I'm Daniel. Samuel looked him up and down. You've done construction before. Daniel nodded. Carpentry. For nearly 15 years. I can tell. You hold a broom like it's a hammer. Both men laughed. Samuel thought for a moment. I need someone. My delivery employee quit yesterday. The pay isn't great, but it's honest work. Daniel blinked. He wasn't sure he had heard correctly. A job. If you want it. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I'd love it. Be here tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock. I'll be early. The next morning Daniel arrived at 7. Samuel smiled as he unlocked the front door. I figured you might. Daniel worked harder than anyone Samuel had ever employed. He carried boxes, organized shelves, fixed broken furniture, repaired old bookcases without being asked. Customers noticed immediately. This place looks wonderful. It feels different. Samuel knew why. Daniel cared. Not because he owned the bookstore. Because someone had trusted him. One evening, after closing time, Samuel handed Daniel an envelope. Inside was his first paycheck in nearly 3 years. Daniel stared at it for a long time. His hands shook. Samuel became concerned. Everything all right? Daniel nodded, unable to speak. Finally he whispered, I forgot what it felt like to earn something again. Samuel smiled. You earned every penny. Daniel walked outside into the cool evening air. He looked up at the sky. The same city, the same streets, the same buildings, but somehow, everything looked different. Not because the world had changed. Because hope had returned. He reached into his pocket and gently held the painted stone. The words were beginning to fade slightly, but their meaning had only grown stronger. You matter more today. Daniel smiled. For the first time in years, he finally believed it.